Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
One of the questions I was going to ask you as we were going across, between the three different agencies, what was it you think that all three of them were looking for that attracted you to them and vice versa? It's like, what kind of skill set did you have that carried across all three of them?
Yeah, so Jared, another great question, but I would have to think, my forte was actually I had pretty good interviewing skills. I was kind of maybe from teaching and talking to students, and that might be part of it. And I guess, when I teach interviewing, I always talk about the 80-20 rule, which is, you let the interviewees speak 80% of the time, and you, the interviewer, no more than 20% or less. So, I was very keen on listening. I was steady. I wouldn't get angry, wouldn't judge people. It was almost like, I would sit down with people, whoever they were, whether they were, radicals or fraudsters or people working for the cartel, and just, tell me your story. Tell me your story. I'm interested in where you're from, what you're about, why, what is your motive for doing these things? And I'm not here to judge you. I just want to know about you. So for me, it was about, I was a good interviewer. I was a good listener. I had empathy for other people. And I think, and I could use that across all of those three distinguished federal agencies. And it served, by and large, it served me well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess part of it is because of who your clientele, or if you can call it clientele, but there's a line that goes around all of them. The cartels and the jihadists have actually a fair number of similarities, and these guys, their purpose is to, part of it is different. Their end goal, the cartels, I think, just want to make a lot of money.
Sure. Sure.
The jihadists, obviously, they want to tear down everything about our society.
Yes.
But the bottom line is they're trying to skirt the legal authorities. They're trying to skirt obstacles like,
Right.
the border wall and things, where we have a border wall, I guess. But
Right.
right. They're trying to get around. They're trying to be secret. They're trying to, inflict as much damage as they can while they benefit themselves. And that kind of, I don't know, but it's almost like an overall hatred of everything about the American way. And
right.
I don't know, that kind of thing. And fraudsters, I guess, are almost in the same category. Although they just want to stay completely under the radar.
Right.
But
you're right. Yeah. But let me just go back to your question, which is so good. It's such a great question. And I may have just half completed it. So, of course, when I came into the Bureau, and again, just luck of the draw, when you think about it, here's something that you brought up, which is interesting. Luck of the draw, just a chance, because normally new people coming into the Bureau, coming into the FBI, will end up in an applicant squad for about a year or two, where they go out and they interview people that are applying for government positions. That's how we break in for the most part. And that's what I was expecting when I got my assignment to Newark, New Jersey. That's where I thought I'd be going. Instead, somebody had the foresight, kind of common sense, to say, wait a second, check this guy's resume. He's coming from the Middle East. He knows a little Arabic. He's lived in Riyadh. This is maybe someone that should be on the JTTF. Speaks Spanish. Jared, we also worked Cuban intelligence matters. And I ended up becoming the alternate for Cuban intelligence matters, but that's another story. But I came into, and the reception I got from my boss, for example, said, he sat me down, he said, Strange, I don't know how you got on this squad. And just between you and me, you shouldn't be here. He said, you should be doing applicants. So that was the welcome I got from this individual. He wasn't a bad guy, but I mean, he just didn't. But I think that's another story. But again, I came to this situation. I was kind of armed. You think about it, because I knew the customs of the people. I knew the history. I knew the politics. I mean, my goodness, I had been in Riyadh for 1 month, and then they had that siege of Mecca, where the rebels took the holy mosque in Mecca, and the hostages in Iran, the burning down of our embassy in Pakistan. All of this was in just a few months that I had arrived in the Middle East. And so for me, it was a huge lesson on how volatile the region was, and all the, Shiites versus Sunnis. And I all of a sudden, after 5 or 6 years, I knew the customs. I knew how to talk, have tea with people, relax, get to know them. And that served me pretty well, knowing the customs. And again, you were talking about Mormons and doing your thing overseas, where you can actually get to know people, speak the language, know the customs, and you become very effective dealing or interacting with those people. So, I came into that squad with a certain advantage, and it actually worked pretty well. And on one occasion, and it's in the book, where my specialty was recruiting informants, sources, and so I was kind of a natural for that, again, because of my background. And so it came to a point where I was in a situation, and this was on the right on the cusp of the first Gulf War, and here were some individuals that they knew some stuff, and I'll leave it there. And so anyway, things worked out. And had I not, had my boss or had the people in Newark said, no, Strange is going to applicants, that may never have happened.
Well, it's always interesting to see the difference between an actual leader that looks at the individual for not just where he is, but also what he's done, and applying those special skills to, the task at hand. And then, the typical bureaucrat that just says, no, you got to serve this many years in here and this many years here.
Right.
And there's a certain step, and it's almost like they want to push people down rather than putting the right people on the bus, which is,
Exactly.
and, being in small business, I'll tell you, if I don't put the right people on the bus and only the correct number of people on the bus, then I wouldn't be in business very long. So,
right.
There's a speed of business and a speed of action that has to happen with real leaders. That it sounds like whoever recognized your skills, that was critical for not just your career, but also, the mission at hand. And that's, who cares if you only have a couple of months in the FBI? If you have a skill set that they need, then man, put that to work. So you started with the FBI, and then how long were you with the Bureau?
So I was with the Bureau about 3 years, and I ran into 2 former FBI agents who were working for the Agency for International Development in the Office of Inspector General. And so they were working fraud matters. So that was the big emphasis there. And, I had lunch with one of them in Newark, and he said, look, your background is international. You have a Spanish speaking background. We need someone in our Costa Rica office to work fraud. And, when I heard that, I'm like, wow, that's tantalizing. Yeah. But I said, look, I don't know much, if anything, about fraud. And this guy said, well, we can teach you that. Don't worry about that. Just get over here. You're going to love it. You'll be traveling all over the world. We have cases everywhere. We're a small kind of elite unit. We're made up of, former FBI agents, IRS CID agents as well. And they had come into this small little Office of Inspector General in the investigations office. So I kind of, threw caution to the wind, and, I left the bureau and then went over to this group. And I guess within a year or two, I was in Costa Rica, and I worked in Central America for a few years.
So give me an example of some of the cases you would work there.
Right. So I remember working one case. It was a commodity import case. It was out of Egypt. And we had, I think it was called to our attention by an audit that our audit team did. And there was these source origin violations to begin with, and fines. And the case agent that actually was a fella from Salt Lake City. He was IRS agent Howard, and Howard was kind of teaching me how to work fraud. And then he was moving on. I think he was going back to IRS, and he said, "Hey, I want to show you something." And so he had this box of documents, and he said, this particular person is, putting in bids, these and kind of false bids to secure a contract with a company out of South Carolina. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, take a look at these papers and you'll see that they're all from different companies, but they have the same phone number or the same address. So something is wrong here." So, and in fact, that's what was happening. He was actually, trying to import, actually exporting. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back. Importing something, but he was using not only his own company, but he was using two shell companies that he had. So, I worked on that case. I got in touch with the Department of Justice over in South Carolina, in Greenville, South Carolina. So we ended up prosecuting. It was actually an Egyptian billionaire who was defrauding the U.S. government. So we worked a conspiracy to defraud the government. Went over to Cairo to interview people there, some of our agency people there. We had an informant that was working with us on the ground in Egypt, and said, yes, we had a CFO that came forward and said, "Look, I'm a Baptist. I have to be honest. I was told to forge documents and so that we could get this multi-million-dollar contract." So, in essence, there was just no competition. And so they pled out, they knew what was coming down the pike. And so they pled out, they paid a $500,000 fine. They pleaded guilty to conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government. And then they debarred that company. But, it's ironic because the guy had maybe 50 more companies so what was one company that he would throw away? He didn't really care. And he would go on to some other business. But that was one of the cases that I remember. And just another case and this was a much, much simpler case, but it involved, we had contractors that were basically providing tapes, film, briefcases, things of that nature to people within the State Department at our agency. And one of the ladies from the contractor came forward and said, something is wrong here. We're getting enormous bills, and we're noticing requisitions for inordinate amounts of equipment that we've never seen before. So, we opened the case. I had to go from almost to each department and show them the requisitions and say, did you order 100 briefcases? And, inevitably these departments would say, no way. We order maybe one briefcase a year. So, we soon were able to kind of to realize that the person that was procuring this stuff was, he was the person that was involved in it. And so we built up this case against him. We called him into the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland. That's where the contractor was based. And, he was with his attorney. And right away, they said, I remember them saying, our guy, we apologize, but our guy has a crack addiction. And so he's been writing up all these requisitions, and he receives the equipment, and then he takes it and he sells it on the street. Briefcases, film, stuff that can be easily fixed. So I just remember so anyway, we what we did is, we course, he pled guilty, and then we used him in a sting operation where he was selling his things. It was to a store in Alexandria, Virginia, owned by two Afghani guys. And so with the local police department, we took those people down as well. But it was a sad thing because, Fred was a very nice guy. And maybe in another life we would have been friends. He liked basketball. He was from DC. He was in the military at one time. And he was a nice guy, but he was just, he had that addiction, a crack addiction. And this was during the epidemic of crack that we were seeing. And I said, how did you do that? How did you get away with, getting all this stuff? And he said, well, to be honest with you, I would wait till Friday afternoon, about 3:00. I knew my boss wanted to go home. He was just signing his name. And so I would, then go to him and say, here's 40, 50 pages of requisitions. And he wouldn't even look at them. He would just sign and then say, I've got to go. So yeah, there was another case that it was a much smaller case. It wasn't a multi-million-dollar case, but to me, the humanity within the case and the speaking to the crack addiction at the time in DC was something I'll never forget.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.